Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Very excited to be presenting and chairing this joint Dubber Microsoft webinar on performance and compliance in the hybrid workplace. My name is Tim Ward. I'm the Director of Dubber's Microsoft practice across APAC, and as I mentioned, I'll be chairing today's event. Very excited to be presenting our two speakers that we have today. First up will be Leon Wright, who is the Advanced Workload Lead at Microsoft. Leon will be discussing the hybrid work and the great next disruption that is causing, and our readiness for that disruption. Following Leon's presentation, we'll be handing over to Andy Locke, who is Dubber's Chief Customer Officer, where Andy will be discussing the impacts of the hybrid work and how Dubber is uniquely placed to address these. After Andy's presentation, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit those and we'll try to address those during the session, or if we run out of time, we'll certainly follow up later to address those. Just before I hand over to Leon, just wanted to give you a quick overview of Dubber for those that are not familiar who we are. Dubber is an Australian success story that is now a global leader in cloud-based call recording and voice AI. We're born of the cloud. We have a 10-year pedigree of recording and voice AI globally, and primarily in the large carrier and service provider networks around the world, both on fixed and mobile networks. Late last year, we introduced our solution on the Microsoft Teams platform when Microsoft released the Graph API for compliance call recording. With the explosive growth of Microsoft Teams, we've seen huge demand for our services, and coupled with our supported platforms, again, we believe we're uniquely placed to address the needs of the hybrid workplace. And with that, I'll hand over to Leon to give us his presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Tim. So yeah, really looking forward to today, and yeah, hearts go out to our colleagues in Melbourne today that are impacted and around the world. It's a changing world, and we're rolling with those punches. When we look at the hybrid work paradox, vaccines are rolling out across the globe. The world is opening up, and there's a lot of business leaders are thinking about, how they'll navigate this messy middle, with some people working remotely, some in the office, and many a combination of both. And that's what we'll see more. What we can't think is that this is a temporary state. We've studied the data, and we look closely, how work is changing, and we believe that hybrid work is a durable trend. It's going to last well into the future. Moving forward, every organization will need a new operating model for hybrid work, one that doesn't rely on old norms. It's not about the 8-hour day, and it's definitely not about the 9 to 5. Employees, are looking for something that's more flexible. They're looking for remote work options, but at the same time, people are looking for more in-person capabilities. This is something we lost through COVID. We lost the ability to translate culture. And that's the hybrid work paradox. How do you, give people more in-person experiences, and how do you give them more flexibility? And that's where we as Microsoft really lean into focus. Over a year into the pandemic, digital is accelerating. But if you thought that COVID was this big catalyst and that was the big point in time, it's just the beginning. What we're starting to see is that this is an inflection point, and we're actually going to see this accelerate. It's no longer the move to remote work, but it's rather the move to hybrid work. And there's going to be a massive transition that happens as we move through this. We see it in the data. In the global surveys we've conducted, and specifically our Work Trend Index, 80% of managers, say that their company is considering redesigning office space for hybrid work. Now, this is transformational. This means that organizations are already preparing and changing their office space for hybrid work. If you had to take the top blue chip companies of the world today and say to them, let all your people go back to work in a pre-pandemic format, they wouldn't be able to do that because they've already reconfigured themselves for hybrid work, reduced the workforce, and a lot of times reduced building space. So there's been significant change. But employees want that remote option. They want to be engaged in meetings, and how do we provide that post-pandemic opportunity? It's going to be about flexibility, and it's going to be about extreme flexibility that's going to be the durable trend. And this is also the opportunity that we have to really drive together. Empowering our people, for the new world of work to embrace this. One of the other things that is really important is, depending on culture and geography, also depends how people will go back into the hybrid work model. Let me give you an example of that. In China, 81% of the employees are back at work compared to pre-pandemic levels. So that's pretty high. People are really back in the office. If we look at Australia, we're sitting at 19% versus pre-pandemic. So as Australians, we voted with our feet, and we're saying this new flexible work style is something we like and we adopt, and it's something we want to really move forward with. But as we look forward, it's going to be based on a new operating model, and organizations are busy configuring for this. And it's going to have three major pillars of people, places, and process. Those are going to be the three core areas that we need to focus. When we look at people, to help people thrive in a more flexible work world, we need to rethink the entire employee experience. That's from creating culture, which I said we lost so much of during COVID, and that's to attracting and retaining talent. Once again, a major shift in a hybrid world, because talent is everywhere. Talent is accessible. This is truly democratized the workforce. It's not about being in a major city anymore, but truly pulling a member of the team from anywhere in the world and working the hours that they choose. But the other main component is about creating listening systems. If COVID has taught us one thing, it's taught us that managers and organizations are not listening, and this is the feedback we've got. We need to pay more attention to employees and get those listening systems working really well, specifically around well-being. Every organization needs a plan and need policies to support that plan and to support that extreme flexibility. An example of that is really giving managers the autonomy to design and drive their teams in the manner that they see fit for their organization or their specific team group. It's really going to be about configuring that experience for your best productivity. One of the things that we've been challenged with is social capital. Every business must be world-class, and all forms of synchronous and asynchronous conversations and communications. And that's another massive change in COVID. You've got to get both of these right to sustain the culture in the organization. At Microsoft, one of the biggest and fastest growing content types that we have is meeting recordings. It's just expected. It's no longer, should I record this meeting? It's expected that it's recorded, it's transcripted, and you know what? Don't just record it, give me the highlights, because I don't have time to go and look at the whole meeting. And it's got to be available on demand when I choose to consume it. The second dimension is continuous learning. Organizations are ultimately only as good as their ongoing learning and the learning culture that they nurture. How quickly can they acquire that knowledge? How do you diffuse that knowledge, and how do you diffuse that knowledge specifically in a hybrid workplace? How do you get it through the organization? And then how do you learn both from your customers and learn from your internal experiences? The final consideration that we look at is one of human capital. This is critical. At Microsoft, what we're doing is we're taking a very data-driven approach. We know that back-to-back meetings are not good for us. We know that these challenge our well-being, and building short breaks is critical. And this is what we've done. We've built those into Outlook. We've built it into all the applications. We've built it into the meetings and webinar capability. But where the cultural change comes is getting people to implement that and live it and physically take control of their diaries, because people don't want to, by definition, don't want to say no and will continue to stretch themselves. This becomes very dangerous because people start to drive and they start to burn out. So managing employee well-being is going to be a critical consideration as we move into the as we move forward in this hybrid world. Places. Places is critical. Our approach to places is going to hinge on, the gap between physical and digital. How do we involve with employee needs? And this starts with, how do we put employees first? Okay, that's going to be the critical one. We've got to create that inclusive culture and really create that environment. What we've also done here is we've started designing the experience for people that are not in the room, and that's good. That's a really important consideration. Is creating something that really starts to drive and pull in people in that virtual environment. As an example, when you look at the equitable distribution of people in a meeting, it's by far more the external people. How do we really pull those people in and drive an inclusive culture for them and let them truly engage in the meeting? So with that,
today's Microsoft Teams rooms bridge the gap between in-person and remote meeting attendees, providing everyone high-quality, inclusive experiences. Going forward, these rooms will deliver more natural and immersive experiences for hybrid work. The focus room will evolve to connect in-person and remote attendees in a more unified experience, with a larger screen where interactions feel more natural as you sit face-to-face across from life-size remote colleagues. A camera placed at eye level to improve eye contact, spatial audio so you hear people's voices from their position on the screen, and to enrich real-time collaboration, meeting chat notes, and actions will be at the forefront of all Teams rooms. Larger rooms with more attendees make it challenging for people working remotely to know who is present and who's talking. Teams rooms will deliver a meeting experience where everyone is fully represented and connections feel natural. We have reimagined the meeting room to bring people face-to-face with remote colleagues and unlock more space for people, content, and collaboration. Technology will fade to the background, with premium microphones hidden in the ceiling. Intelligent camera technology will bring in-room participants clearly into view through individual video streams. And spatial audio will help remote participants establish presence with a virtual seat in the room. All so that you have more authentic connections with everyone in the meeting. Our vision for meetings is about leveling the playing field for everyone, where remote and in-person attendees are represented equally and everyone can collaborate without compromise. Today's Microsoft.
Moving on to process. The shift to hybrid work gives business leaders a rare opportunity to transform. And this is to really drive your business process in bold new ways. And if you're thinking of the next few months as simply a return to the office, you're missing a massive opportunity. You instead take that time to really evaluate your business process, prioritize, and drive that digital transformation. There's going to be a lot of organizations that don't come out of this hybrid work having gained market share, and it would be those that have really missed the significant opportunity to reimagine themselves. For us, we've gone and reimagined our business process. We'll re-look at our, not only the applications that we're using, but examples like order to cash, investing in centralized global demand centers. This is what's allowing us to increase our lead generation and just engage with our customers in a more meaningful manner. Everything's become more complex. Hybrid is challenging, but with that becomes the biggest opportunities. I spoke about the talent that's everywhere, the ability to really drive diversity into your teams. We've got security challenges. The bridge or the security bridge is no longer the organization. It's everyone needs to be protected from anywhere on the internet. So zero trust security architecture becomes critical. But more importantly, it's not just it's not just our employee expectations that have fundamentally changed. Our customer expectations have changed. An example of this is things like curbside pickup that happened during COVID. Those are the kind of services that customers will expect moving forward, and not only will expect to be transformed and to accelerate. So with that, we're excited as Microsoft to drive and work with you through this new hybrid world. Go ahead, drive your hybrid workday, and whatever you do, just be awesome through that workday. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Andy Locke. Now, Andy, an absolute marketing guru, digital leader, entrepreneur, and if that wasn't enough, an Amazon best-selling author. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Andy.
Thanks, Leon. Really appreciate the intro. I'm just going to pull up some slides here to share with you, some thoughts to share with you all, and that'll get us going. Hang on 1 second here. It's all happening. Okay, here we go. Got my slides up here. Just waiting for our little connection here to work, and should be good to go. Right, have you guys got my slides up? Okay.
Yep, they're there, Andy. Just go presentation mode.
Presenting. Okay, done. All right, you should be good to go now. Tell me if these aren't working. We've got a bit of a funky bandwidth connection here today. So I think one of the most difficult things that's happened over the past year is distance. We sort of took distance as something that was easily overcome. We could eventually get to meet each other in person. We could find different ways of listening and understanding. But as workforces dispersed, and not just the workforce many of us live in, meetings and offices and the like, but the workforces in call centers, sales teams and the like, tyranny of distance kicked in. And I don't know about you, but the number of times I wished, whether it was a customer conversation, a presentation, training, a conversation necessary for HR purposes, I just always wished I could have hit replay on it and understood whether A, I got my message across, I think, clearly enough, and B, did I hear it right at the other end? And so this tyranny of distance needs to be closed by learning to listen differently. But underpinning that are some very, very fundamental and crucial trends. We've got this enormous drive to differentiation going on. As businesses have gone through sort of a 10 to 15 year acceleration around e-commerce, selling and working with from a distance, how do you manage customer experience, brand experience, employee experience in a touchless world? And talking to a call center leader the other day, he sort of said this really resonated, because part of the challenge now is, you know, I could always kind of listen to some of the things customers said, but it was much harder for me to get a feel for where my employees were. I can't just walk down to the call center now and see how they're all doing. So that ability for me to use AI, machine learning, to predict how well an employee is going to perform based on the tone, the language they're using, the behaviors, the keyword phrases occurring on calls. And at the start of the of COVID, well over a year and a half ago now, a lot of the compliance mandates around recording calls were put on hold. Whether it was the UK, the US, even here to some extent, they sort of the regulators lightened the load a little bit as we dealt with the dispersed workforce. Well, that sort of hold period's over. In many cases, actually recording crucial conversations, whether it's to evidence dispute resolution, whether it is for the purposes of investigations, audit, security and risk assessments, is now required. There's no choice but to do it. All of that requires correct evidentiary change and change control, requires this drive to data. I think the other phenomenon we live with, in those of us that have been in tech for too long and showing our age now, you know, we talked about BYOD, or bringing your own device to work, for well over 2 decades. The unnatural phenomenon going on now is bringing your own application to work, because increasingly employees are turning to familiar chat apps. They're turning to all kinds of different conferencing platforms. So there has never been a more important time for business to establish the system of record, because the system of record is the control point. For us, that's Microsoft Teams. We simply say, that's it. You can only communicate with us on it. We'll only communicate out on it. And recently, we've seen quite large banks use the analysis of the recorded conversation to spot where breaches and misbehavior is occurring, simply with people saying, hey, let's take that offline. I'll see you on WhatsApp, or I'll see you on something completely unauthorized and unsecure. Being able to detect that even in the voice call and ensure that that system of record is being adhered to. So it's never been more important. And these trends are just driving this enormous demand for platforms like Microsoft Teams. And I think the interesting thing we're also seeing as we talk to people looking to drive productivity in the workplace is this notion of trying to control app dispersion. This idea that an employee has to jump from their email to Slack to Zoom, back to Slack, back to something else, to no, it's all in Teams. There is one place you go to do your work. That's it. And the productivity gain from doing that, let alone the security gain and the compliance gain, is very, very significant. So when we look at this notion of voice, though, it's interesting. I think many of us have sort of forgotten about the amount of crucial conversations that occur in our lives that are voice-based. We sort of think of our day as being an email tsunami in the morning, followed by messaging back and forth with people. But today, more than 80% of all crucial conversations are still voice. And the value in that conversation ends the moment the call is over. And that's a tragedy, because you think how easily on Microsoft Teams, automatically, every conversation, every chat being captured, converted to data with instant alerts, CX insights, employee insights, brand insights that are applicable across the entire organization. It is an opportunity that just is waiting to be addressed. And it's something that isn't going to go away. The majority of financial services CFOs today, they're going to make remote work permanent for roles that allow it. Many large organizations are just simply saying, look, coming to the office is no longer actually required. We tend to be a true hybrid workplace at Dubber, so we still encourage people to come into the office, but if people need to work at home, that's absolutely fine. And largely, we just work from anywhere. Today, I'm working in Sydney. I managed to dodge the lockdown at my home in Melbourne, so I'll be up here for a little longer than I thought. But the reality is legacy approaches to call recording and some of what we call personal call recording, and I'll touch this on in a minute, are either not sustainable or not compliant. And it is crucial that as you look at your Microsoft Teams implementation, and it's one of the many reasons to choose Teams, is your ability to undertake compliant voice and conversational capture. And that takes many forms, and I'll get to that in a minute, but it's a very important consideration, because the old way of app-centric or personal voice recording is simply not compliant. There are other platforms you could use for video conferencing that come with a record function. Unfortunately, that is simply not PCI compliant. It's not GDPR compliant. If you're in healthcare, it's not HIPAA compliant. And there is enormous risks of leakage in that data set. You certainly wouldn't allow that to happen to your email. Don't allow it to happen to your voice conversations. Whereas in the call and contact center, where a lot of call recording has been taken place, all that's occurred there is the creation of voice silos. Data is locked up and attached to applications. Storage costs are too much to keep and retain everything over long periods of time. It's not easily scaled, and crucially, it is not unified. One of the enormous advantages of Dubber on Teams is this notion that, yeah, you've got all your conversations from Microsoft Teams now in one place, but you've also got all your mobile conversations. You've got your legacy SIP trunk connections captured. You could even have third parties, other applications being captured. You could have all your chat and messaging captured in one place. So that they're not providing these legacy, this old way of approaching it is simply not scalable. It's not flexible, it's not secure, it's not compliant. Be very careful with it if it's occurring in your business, because you're putting your business at risk from both a compliance, security, and also a productivity standpoint. So when you look at sort of ad hoc or personal call recording, as I've said, it doesn't meet many of the thresholds you would expect from any compliant environment. Now, clearly at one end of the spectrum, you've got large banks who have very severe and aggressive compliance mandates and regulatory expectations. But even talking to a small business owner the other day, running an auto parts dealership, they use Dubber to capture all the conversations with customers, and they use it for a use case I hadn't really occurred to me as being vital, but to them it is absolutely vital, and that is order verification. So they're able to capture that call, route that into their Microsoft Dynamics and their Microsoft CRM, and they're able to then check and confirm orders that have just been flowing into their business. They have an immutable proof of the customer order, not as someone typed or reinterpreted or scribbled into a notebook, but rather actually specifically what the customer said. And that is of enormous value. So I don't want compliance necessarily to just be seen as sort of the fear of a regulator coming after you at some point. It's also the other end of the spectrum is actually, am I able to deliver accurate orders to customers because I have an immutable proof of what the customer said they wanted. So the applications I'm trying to paint here for for Microsoft Teams, of course, but voice data enabled Microsoft Teams, where every one of those conversations is turned into voice data, is an enormous productivity edge. A little example for you around revenue intelligence. We've looked closely at this, and if your salespeople are making the call on Teams or making it on their mobile or undertaking sales calls and things like that, there's an expectation that at some point they're going to enter all those notes into Microsoft Dynamics and into your CRM system you build on Microsoft, and they're going to keep those notes up to date. Well, that doesn't survive. That theory normally doesn't survive its first meeting with a salesperson, who they're generally, very, very good but very hardworking people, and so nothing's ever up to date. Well, suddenly now I've got a record of every single conversation automatically appearing inside my CRM records. Everything is constantly up to date. But more importantly, if I'm the sales leader, I'm instantly getting alerts on keywords. Keywords might be cancel. Keywords might be unhappy. Could be you've won the order or we're ready to place the order. Suddenly I'm not wandering around wondering and phoning my sales leaders and sales managers and asking them where we're at with the customer. I actually am alerted to it and know in real time, and I can actually listen to the conversation if I need to. So it's an enormously powerful.
Is where I was leading to. We work a lot with compliance leaders around the world, and I'd encourage you to take a look at dubber.net. There's a lot of great content up there, including some recent webcasts done globally with RegTech on key compliance trends. And one of the interesting things here that most businesses are facing, first of all, is this notion of the complexity of multi-geography and regulatory demands, both from core regulators right the way through to industry bodies, through to government regulation and the like. But employee, the sort of the tyranny of distance has made that even harder as employees sort of increasingly turn to favorite apps or whatever they've managed to download last. So this notion of standardizing on Teams as a system of record, as the communications platform, is critical if you're going to achieve compliance. Because what you're able to do then is not only lower your cost dramatically, avoid sort of data and device dispersion, which gets your data in one place, this notion of a voice intelligence cloud. All of those things come together to close this compliance chasm, but they end the time it takes to end not knowing. This notion of knowing the customer, this notion of being able to rapidly conduct forensic investigations. I was talking to a major bank here, and with them looking at a test pattern on a Microsoft Teams environment coupled with Dubber, they can now investigate and query activity occurring with traders and brokers in seconds. In the past, a single query might have taken them 45 minutes to well over an hour to complete end to end, and they could have 200 or 300 of those queries every day. Now it's as simple as opening Bing, typing in an agent name, typing in a keyword, typing in a time period, and I can instantly see conversation sets. That changes the game if you're in compliance, but also changes the game if you're in sales training, if you're in coaching, if you're a business leader wanting to know what was said and what's being said, if you've got a customer complaint, everything changes. And I've run some very large call centers myself. I used to be presented with these enormous stacks of transcriptions, and they were largely unreadable. They were just endless lines of conversations, and some poor soul would have to sit there and highlight bits that were important. With Dubber and Teams, you've suddenly got transcriptions. They not only are beautiful, they look great, so they're easy to navigate, but that also means they're insightful. So this ability suddenly to get insightful data from every conversation in the enterprise. And as I said, that ability just to go, let's hit replay on that conversation. I'd like to know what was said. Let's actually know what was said, not what someone is saying what was said. We solve that in real time. And you just look today, and in over 2020, it was about 1.5 billion in fines. We've seen very big fines levied in the US in the past 6 months on financial institutions, largely based off this inability to control the combination of a voice conversation, a text conversation, and other forms. Now with Microsoft Teams as a system of record and data integrated, you'll then not knowing, and you can get well ahead of receiving fines. So we're really looking to solve this very simple stack from how you capture and turn voice into an asset in your business. How do you automate knowing well ahead of receiving a regulatory request, because suddenly you've got alerts, reports, you've got keyword notifications, you've got workflow automation built off that voice data set. And then suddenly I've got instant reporting and response. On reporting, it's interesting. I mean, I've for many years have instigated and probably spent now hundreds of millions of dollars across many businesses on NPS surveys, customer sat surveys, you name it, they're going on all the time. The problem with them is they're all in the past. You're looking back 6 months, 3 months, 12 months. Whereas now today, there's this ability to go, hey, I'd like real-time intelligence and NPS data on conversations that occurred this morning. I want to know, is my NPS up or down? Is my customer sat up or down? And I was talking to a CEO of a large financial institution here, and he said, what's really interesting about that is I will ask someone, we're running this nationwide training program to educate everybody on a specific thing. I want to know on all our Microsoft Teams video calls as managers are doing their calls with their teams, was this set of keywords used, and which managers in fact did not brief their employees. Right now, he says that will take me 4 to 6 weeks to understand that, whether that happened or not, because we have to go out and survey the employees and we aggregate data from all these forms, and eventually we figure out what's going on. But now I know in real time, is what I asked to happen has it actually happened? So enormously valuable. So at the end of the day, being able to derive data insights and voice intelligence from any conversation of any kind on Teams is vital to compliance. It's vital to gaining intelligence. But I would argue also in this new world of hybrid and dispersed workforces, we have to look at motivation and incentivization and productivity in a new way, because we don't have the benefit of wandering down the hallway and trying to get a gut read on how things are trucking and how employees are feeling and things they could be challenged by. So I think what we're seeing here is the ability to actually improve employee engagement and really affect positive outcomes from employees. And it all starts with unlocking the potential of voice data to do that. So I'd really encourage you to look at the immense potential that exists in Teams, not as just a way of connecting with employees, but as a way of capturing data in such a form that you can dramatically shift the productivity of the business, improve employee engagement, and satisfy requirements for greater revenue, compliance, and people intelligence. So with that, why don't I hand back to you, Leon, and perhaps we can kick into more of a Q&A.
Yeah, I'm actually going to hand over to Tim. So Tim.
No problem. Thanks very much. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Leon. Really insightful in terms of both from a Microsoft perspective, as where you're seeing the world, and then obviously from where we at Dubber see the world as well. Have a couple of questions that have come in. I guess one of them's quite a long one, and it's really, I guess, probably addressed to Andy. So, one of the trends that we've seen through COVID is this notion of bring your own app to work. Where employees using their own apps, and you touched on that earlier. For example, with WhatsApp, what are the issues that you see, from your perspective in doing that, and what can companies actually do about it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago with a couple of chief risk officers from major banks, and was listening to them to sort of lament this issue of rogue employees who are using their own apps for text messaging and things, and how bad it was, and how do we control it. And my point to them was, guys, I think you've got it wrong. It's actually the customer that's driving that behavior. It's actually the customer at the other end who's saying, hey, I'm on WhatsApp, can I text you from WhatsApp? And I think, and that's largely because those same customers, when they're faced with other options to communicate, are forced into really draconian, you've got to download the app and you're forced into some subscription model you don't want. And so they just don't want to do it. Whereas the beauty of something like Teams is it is infinitely standardizable across a customer base as well. And so you want to be on the most popular platform. And that's the benefit of Teams, is that it's standardizable and usable externally by customers, and it's standardizable internally. Now, I think the other thing there is the other leakage point that drives it is suppliers. And I think it's absolutely crucial as you're thinking about your Microsoft Teams deployment that you look at that as something every supplier must embrace as well, because your suppliers implement another breakpoint in this notion of a system of record, and they dilute your ability to capture voice data. So think hard about saying, this is our system of record, whether you're on the inside or the outside and you want to communicate with us, this is how you access and use Microsoft Teams, and there is zero burden to doing so. So compliance and standardization are absolutely achievable on a platform like Teams, and that's actually not true for most platforms in the market. I also think there is an underappreciation in not so much financial institutions, but a number of other businesses of the immense security risks in many of these other platforms. They just don't quite understand how vulnerable they are from hackers and intrusion and privacy leakage and data leakage on a large number of these other platforms. And there's one very popular video conferencing platform out there, but they don't understand that if I hit record on that platform and you don't have Dubber implemented, it's recording to a data cloud that's not onshore, so you've just breached GDPR if you're collecting customer data. There's no auto redaction on PCI data. There's no systemized control of management, so an employee could be downloading a phone call from the CEO and sending it to the media. They could do whatever they feel like doing with the recording. So this is a really important issue, I think, for that has been amplified by sort of the new hybrid workplace that every organization, I think, needs to revisit and become quite passionate about.
Yeah, no, thanks, Andy. That's great. I mean, as you say, pushing the mandate back on the business, not letting customers control the methods that they communicate. Another one we had come in, a lot of UC platforms and apps already come with inbuilt recording. And I guess we've kind of addressed this already. I mean, why do I need anything else? So, if I've effectively got a recording solution today, why would I need to implement a Dubber solution?
Well, I think the first thing is most of those are personal call recordings. So in order for you to use the call recording efficiently, I now need to download it, I need to store it somewhere, I need to share it. There's no provenance, there's no privacy control, there's no data control. So if you're okay not being compliant and not meeting privacy mandates, and you're okay with all the security risks involved, which are substantial, keep doing it, but you're at risk. And the simple answer is, for the price of a couple of coffees a week, you can be fully compliant. And is that worth risking your business for? Because you can go ask 3 of the major banks in the US now, who have totaled up more than $50 million of fines in the past year, about the consequence of messages leaking. So it is and inappropriate conversations occurring with customers that couldn't be monitored. There is no point, and I know I'm sort of painting a bit of a threatening picture here, but the real point is there's no point in recording anything if you're not listening. And the way to listen is through AI, search, keywords. You can't read the internet without Bing. You've got to have a simple, easy interface into that data that's intelligent, and that's what Dubber brings to the table for less than a price of a couple of coffees a week. So why wouldn't you do it right? Is the question. Yeah,
thanks. That makes perfect sense. Final one, I guess, given where we're at time-wise. Obviously, we've painted a picture there around the compliance issue, how Dubber addresses it. For companies that have this tough compliance issue and they're grappling with multimodal communications, etc. What are your tips and tricks for getting started in solving this problem?
Did you want to take that one first, Leon, and I can weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key component of that is to your point, make sure that you have the right platform. I think, Andy, that's the key one. Make sure that you're in an ecosystem that has the same value system as your organization, and is looking at the customer first and protecting data. That is the first point of departure, and from there build up. From there, drive, and pull in, like example, just like Dubber, pulling in and making sure that you don't have those bespoke workloads or those bespoke out-of-band discussions are now in-band or inclusive and are pulled into your data estate that is now there for e-discovery, that is there to be searchable, and to report on. So I think that's the key component, Andy.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the real starting point here is understanding the enormous potential in voice data as a service. So understanding that voice data is one of your largest untapped, unrealized sources of data in the enterprise, and creating a system of record, aka Microsoft Teams and Dubber, to capture and collect that all at a fraction of the cost of either personal call recording or application siloed, application specific call recording, unlocks enormous benefits for the enterprise, both productivity, compliance, and intelligence base. So now every single vendor out there loves to sprinkle AI pixie dust over everything they make to make it look better, right? And we're not ashamed to do so ourselves. But I also think we're also ignoring, if we don't establish these systems of record, the potential of AI to actually start learning from every conversation we're having and understand how we could improve conversations across our business, whether they're training, whether they're customer, whether they're legal, whether they're HR. And I can tell you right now, the number of businesses out there that turn to Dubber, and we record billions of minutes of conversations, they're solving real pain points around things like dispute resolution. And it's quite staggering when you go talk to these businesses about the pain they had before, where it was sort of a they said, we said, they said, everyone's got paper notes and trying to recall what was said on a date, to no, actually, here's what was said. This is the recording. Here's the transcript. We can store it forever. There's no limitations. So it kind of falls in the category of, yeah, there's a burning need, but why wouldn't you establish a system of record and start putting voice data to work for the business?
Very, very true. With that, I wanted to say thank you very much to Leon for spending the time with us today, and also thank you to Andy for your valuable insights, and thank you to all those who have attended today's session. As a final note, if there is anyone that would like to find out any further information, or they'd like to book a demo with Dubber, they'd like to find out more about the solution, then please reach out, and we'll be able to provide more information on that.